Now, the music that is in America, um, long before the European colonialism came here, was, of course, the indigenous peoples, First Nations, of the peoples that have been here for tens of thousands of years. And these societies were mm, very advanced in many ways. Um, of course, they had their own music, and their music is involved in more of a spiritual sense, a connection to nature. Um, Also, their songs could be sung in healing ceremonies if you are sick, kind of driving out the evil spirits from one's own psychological uh, life in an effort to, as a way of healing. Um, a lot of the songs talk about their past histories, um, things like bravery, kindness to others. A lot of the songs are about the natural world, songs about the beginning of these indigenous peoples. And each geographic region have their own, they're called creation stories. Where did they come from? So, as an example, um, in the Midwest, in the Lakota Nation, um, they have a uh, creation story. They believe that they came from under the water, and the word is called Mayobiothea. And it's man comes from the underworld, under the water, and that was the Lakota belief. On the west coast of America, uh, places that we would call Washington, Oregon, parts of uh, British Columbia, in all the way up to Alaska, along the Canadian border of North America. Their creation stories revolve around the ocean, a fictitious animal called the thunderbird that whose wings, when he flew, would create thunder, and his screaming would create lightning. And this is where man came from before. So their songs are deeply connected to their culture, spiritual beliefs, and um, to the natural world. So this short video really shows a different look at the history of Native America and the peoples there. And these were not wandering bands of hunters that lived in tents. No, they had established cities where tens of thousands of people lived. They had their own agricultural economies and cleared the forests, and they lived in these they're called a longhouse, and very well protected. So they were an evolved culture, and they influenced American history, in many ways, even to the point of some of our Bill of Rights in our Constitution come directly from First Nations political ideas. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And but at first, I'd like you to take a look at this video from PBS, and it really gives a much more accurate picture of the First Nations, Indigenous people's life, and a little bit about the history in North America as well. And Indigenous people are still here today. Now, in terms of their music has taken on a European musical influence and truly American influence today. And we'll take a look at a short video from the modern times of Indigenous music today. But first, in the description box below and in the email that I'm sending you, take a look at this introduction to Native America. And this will provide a backdrop of what is truly the history of the First Nations peoples here in, it wasn't called America, it was called Turtle Island. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Okay, so we've kind of set the backdrop of what First Nations, Indigenous peoples of early Turtle Island were about. So they have their own kind of genre, and they're called the songscapes. And it describes specific Native American musical expressions that employ traditional singing styles and native languages and instruments. And the main instruments back then were the drum, the flute, a wooden flute, and something called a shaker, which is a rattle with it that they would shake. And it was used to evoke unique landscapes and ancestral places of Native America. So there are three classes of songs, traditional songs that were handed down generation to generation, ceremonial songs based on the natural world, providing songs to grow the crops or when to pick them or a harvest or a feast, that sort of hunting, those sorts of things. And medicine songs that we talked a little bit about for healing purposes. And supposedly to be songs were received in the form of a dream. Also, again, the modern songs showed the influence of European culture. Now, what they suggest is that the beat of the drum, the rhythmic beating of the drum, would put the listener into a kind of dreamlike state. And First Nations peoples were really big on the meanings of dreams. They believed there was no difference in their world of awake or in a dream. and dreams held significant meanings for telling the future or prophecy or those kinds of warnings, those kinds of things. So they really believed in the dream-like state, and that they could receive messages from the natural world from being in these semi-hypnotic trance-like states. They were also brought about by dance. So that's kind of a little nutshell version of the meaning of First Nations music, its traditions, and some of the different genres within its own subset of music. So we'll move on to our next slide from here. Okay, so the North American Indians emphasizing singing accompanied by percussion instruments such as rattles or drums rather than purely instrumental music. North American musical genres include lullabies, which are songs sung to young children, uh, hopefully to put them to sleep or into the dreamscape that we've talked about. You could have a song written about you personally as an individual and your guiding spirits. Curing songs we talked about. Um, Songs performed during stories, again, kind of giving the history of the tribe, and things like bravery and kindness to others and special powers that the individual may have provided to the group. Also during games, ceremonial songs, social dance songs, and singing just during work or daily activities. Um, Music and dance and spirituality are tightly interwoven in a worldview that perceives little separation between the sacred and the secular. And again, as we talked about, each nation's geographic area influenced the kinds of songs and words and meanings um, as a basis for creating their music. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the indigenous music of the past that is still performed today. Now, usually in the summer and fall in the United States, um, indigenous Indian peoples, tribal peoples, hold a kind of celebration, trying their best to maintain their cultural beliefs. And these are called powwow. Now, at the powwow is music and dance. And I'm going to show you a video of a powwow dance and music. And the dance costume is really kind of an imitation of the natural world, maybe an animal or a spirit. And there are different dances and different steps within the dance. Some dances are just for women only, and they have their own songs and they have their own dance steps that they provide. But usually, the dances are in a form of a circle. And it has to do with the belief that the past and the present and the future are all connected. In the Western world, we look forward, forget the past, it's over, um, water under the bridge, that sort of thing, forward thinking, thinking about the future. In Indigenous culture, First Nations culture, they believe everything is connected and it it goes from the past to the present to the future, all in a circle. So this is why their dances are in a circular way. So let's take a look at this video, which will be in the description box below and in the email that I will send you, that shows the music and dance of a modern day powwow in an effort for First Nations peoples to continue their traditional music, stories, and dance. Okay, so our previous slide was about the powwow. And our next musical piece is kind of a combination of today and the past. Now, many First Nations people in America and Canada, they go to school, they go to college, they get regular jobs, and they work in an office and do all the things that everybody else does. But they still have a very strong desire and draw uh, in their free time to practice their ancestral and tribal ceremonies and beliefs. So this is a little video about a young man that works in the city and has an office job, and on the weekends he can't wait to travel and go to one of the powwows that we just talked about. So it's kind of an interesting time machine where you're living in today and yet still deeply connected to the past. So let's take a look at that video, and we'll be back for the next slide. You can find it in the email that I sent you and the description box below. Okay, so we've talked about the powwow, and we've talked about the transition from modern day life and yet still holding cultural beliefs uh, in continuing that in today's world. And there are many native singing groups that have connected to a purely European form of singing and music, and yet still keeping some of the cultural values of traditional music, song, dance within their music video. So this is three sisters, First Nation sisters, that kind of go on a little road trip in their car, very modern day. in forms of dance and singing. And yet, the video expresses some of their past cultural beliefs. So let's take a look at this video here. You can find it in the description box below and the email that I've sent you. Okay, so modern First Nations people singing songs just like anybody else, and yet very subtly maintaining their spiritual and cultural value.